Hi, and welcome to Just What the Doctor Ordered series, The Truth About Diets. Today we finish up a 4-part series, and I have special guest and subject expert with me, Alison St. Germain, as we talk about dieting. Alison has a Bachelor of Science degree in Dietetics, a master's degree in nutrition. She has a consulting business titled Nutrition for All Bodies. She also works at Iowa State University as a student wellness dietitian. So I'm excited to wrap this series up with the subject of making peace with food. So Alison, what is that? What does it mean to make peace with food? What's it look like, and why is it so important?
So, food should be fun to eat. We should enjoy eating it. It shouldn't cause us distress and pain and guilt and all of that. And so that's all coming from diet culture that has made us fearful to eat certain foods because it might make us gain weight or it might make us unhealthy. And so working on that relationship with all foods, not just the nutrient dense foods, because a lot of people can be like, oh, I can make peace with that. But it's the foods like chocolate cake or chips and salsa or candy. How do I make peace with those foods? And that's a little bit harder because what has happened is that those foods often tend to be forbidden foods. And so once we tell ourselves we can never have those foods again, or they're going to make us unhealthy, it makes that food that much more appealing. And we will then probably start craving them as well. And so, and also then what happens is if you restrict something, then the body's natural reaction then is once you get to eat it, you eat more than you normally would. So being able to make peace with food actually means you need to honor your hunger cues as well in order for this to make it happen. Because if you are ravenous and you get to that ravenous point, you will likely choose foods that are high energy and get into your bloodstream quickly. And so then that's what people tend to then feel guilty about. So starting first, I work with clients and students on what does it mean to honor your hunger and what does it mean to eat to fullness or eat to when you're satisfied. It sounds easy, but it's not, because somebody who's been a chronic dieter will lose those hunger and satiety cues. And so the only way to get them back is to be able to eat on a regular basis in order to then rediscover those hunger cues. And just setting yourself up for success in the first place is going to definitely help somebody make peace with food.
Maybe walk us through the steps. I think bread is bad. How do I give myself unconditional permission to eat it?
Yes, great question. So pastas and breads, any type of carbohydrate usually is demonized, especially with somebody with diabetes, because they somehow get the message that because they have diabetes, they can never eat carbs again. And that's just simply not true. And so even somebody with diabetes can be taught intuitive eating. And it just needs to be a little bit more structured and planned, and just to be mindful of the amounts of carbohydrates so the insulin can be regulated around that, but still possible. And so sometimes what I talk to people about is if they're worried about certain food is just talk about the chemical structure of it. And then in the end, what it gets pared down to, is glucose in the bloodstream. And so it all comes down to glucose in the end. And sometimes that, well, except if you're eating fat. So I can't say that. But anyway, so that helps people sometimes realize that if they eat a cookie or they eat an apple or whatever they're eating is going to, in the end, be glucose that our cells can use for energy. That's helpful sometimes. And then also I have a breathing activity I will take clients through as well. And that's helpful for somebody who is very fearful of eating a certain food, and especially if there is an eating disorder involved. And so just making sure the brain is calm, those hormones are released, and you're in a good place and in the present when starting to eat. And then there is a process of reframing that needs to go on with any time you hear the food police, as we call it, in intuitive eating, that creeps up that says, oh, you shouldn't have that. That's not healthy for you. Actively stopping that and actively reframing it is very helpful, because over time, those reframes will create a new neural pathway. And so then over time, you don't have that constant food police running through your head.
Talk about the first steps in honoring your hunger, and how to address the fear around, what if I can't stop eating?
Sure. Well, it's one of the best things to do is to set yourself up for success, is not to let yourself get too ravenous. And if you find yourself going from not hungry to extremely ravenous, you've been missing some subtle cues in between, which is very common, especially for people who have a chaotic job, or they've just been so used to pushing back those hunger cues. And so for those folks, what I recommend is set a timer and eat a little something every 2 hours so you don't get to that ravenous state. And so what we're doing here is building on making sure the body is fed so you don't get to that ravenous state, because I call it chaotic eating. If you're always eating out of extreme hunger, or you're always eating past fullness, because the natural reaction to starting when you're ravenous is to go past your satiety and to go past your fullness. That's not anybody's fault. It's biology, because it's trying to get you to eat food because you've been starving. It's that, if you remember back to our first Tuesday together, we talked about that whole starvation mode, and how even an individual in a large body will go into starvation mode if they don't eat for several hours. So the first thing to do is to make sure you're eating consistently. And it doesn't even matter what you're eating at the start, you just have to start eating consistently. And as individuals learn and they can make peace with food and challenge the food police, then by the end of it all, you can start talking more about nutrition and how all that fits in. But you can't really do that until you can make peace with food and honor your hunger. Very worth it though, because just being able to have that food freedom and body freedom is amazing.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. And I know, Alison, that we've just scratched the surface of this very important topic. Like you said, it takes time, it's a process. So we've got a list of resources, again, that we can share. Also, listeners can go to the Grundy County Memorial Hospital website on the classes and events page and look under the subject of just what the doctor ordered, the truth about diets, and find the resources list, some pictures and slides and recordings, all 4 recordings of this series that we've done. I'd also like to invite our listeners to check out our Healthy Living Challenge. It's also on the classes and events page, and we have a free preview on March 28th. You can see the details, and invite you to check out this course that incorporates just what we've been talking about: intuitive eating, and many of the materials and techniques that we've been talking about during this 4-part conversation. So once again, thank you so much, Alison, for your expertise in joining Grundy County Memorial Hospital dietitians in this conversation. And I hope listeners found it helpful.
Thank you, Crystal. It was great fun. This is my favorite topic to talk about. So thank you for asking me.